Hey everyone, Tyler Pyron here for CMS-Connected, coming to you from the Boston Harbor Distillery, and I promise you, you could not ask for a better set than to have our 50th episode of CMS-Connected. The show is great, the place is great, you're going to love it. We've got the news, we're going to be talking all about the digital transformation, and of course, we've got Amy Martin, as well as the CMS Insider coming your way. So with that in mind, let's get to it. Hello everyone, welcome into the CMS Connected show, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. I'm your host, Tyler Pyron, joined by always to my left, Mr. Scott Lewer of Digital Clarity Group. Scott, before we get into this, I just want to let everybody know where we are, because we are at the Boston Harbor Distillery. How cool is this place?
It is extremely cool. Although, what would be cooler is if this weren't just water in here. I think it would be an even more interesting show for the audience. But good enough as it is. But a great venue that we're in.
His is water. Mine isn't. That's all right. We're going to have a little fun today. All right, but we've got a great show on talk for you today, because it is, in fact, our 50th episode. And I tell you what, it's going to be an awesome show for you. So here's a little bit of an idea what's going on today for our show. Now, our featured topic for this episode will be digital transformation with special guest Leah Kinthart from Informa. She's going to be giving us her take on a business imperative that cuts across every aspect of how companies must engage externally and operate internally. Scott, what do you think of today's topic?
I think that's great. I mean, digital transformation is on everyone's mind these days. I mean, really, this is something that's at the forefront. You find it on the HBR articles, and it's on the CEO's mind even. And so to be able to answer kind of what is it, how do we go about it as an organization, what are some of these other things that we've talked about so much on this show, how do they relate back to digital transformation, I think is really key. So hopefully Leah will help us tie it all together today.
That's going to be the goal. A lot riding on you, Leah. Don't worry, she's ready, I know. Also joining us on the show, we have another installment of the Vendor Spotlight with Amy Martin and her review of Interact, the Intelligent Intranet. Ending the show, as always, insights from our CMS Insider, Scott Lewer, this guy right here. He's going to be discussing education institutions at risk with slow shift to customer experience management. Before we begin, however, want to acknowledge our CMS Connected lead sponsors who really make this entire show happen. First off, Falcon Software. Falcon is a digital experience agency that can provide you with expert advice and integration solutions for all your creative design, content management, e-commerce, and digital marketing needs. Also, Digital Clarity Group, DCG, is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. All right. With all that behind us, let's get right into the top headline, the very first news story. We're going to be talking about San Jose-based Adobe. They have recently acquired Livefyre, a platform that helps brands and publishers collect, curate, and publish user-generated content in an effort to strengthen its social offerings for brands who use its creative and marketing services. Now, the VP at Adobe Experience Manager and Adobe Target, Asim Chandra, recently stated, quote, "With this acquisition, our customers will be able to unify the best social media content with branded experiences created in Adobe Creative Cloud and community-driven content in Adobe Behance and Adobe Stock," end quote. Now, financial details have not been disclosed, so we're really not sure what's going on as far as money's concerned. But the deal is subject to several closing conditions and is expected to close in the coming months. So, Scott, really, what does this mean? I mean, we're going to talk about both of them. What does this mean for Adobe? What does this mean for Livefyre? What does it mean for their customers? Let's start with Adobe. What's this really mean?
Yeah, look, I think it's another way for Adobe to constantly try to stay at the forefront of what's going on in digital marketing. I think certainly we know that user-generated content is what the web is all about. Ultimately, really, it's no longer as much about the content that you can create as an organization, as much as it is about the content that your audience is creating even about you. That's far more compelling. And so to be able to tap into that via Livefyre, I think it's yet one more thing that Adobe does to stay at the cutting edge, I think.
So talk about the Adobe customers. How does this affect them at the end of the day?
Yeah, certainly this helps the Adobe customers in a big way. I mean, quite frankly, the overlap, I don't know what the overlap of that Venn diagram is between Adobe social customers, for example, and Livefyre, but I'd imagine it's pretty high because certainly most of them all have this sort of need. Whether they were a smaller organization or a larger enterprise, many of them have relied on Livefyre for a long time. So certainly to have it all combined together in one place, That's wonderful. And for those who weren't introduced to Livefyre before, maybe they had been using other tools, but I would say that for now, it certainly is fairly easy to make that leap. You're not usually, in this sort of a case, the barrier to exit is very low. And so to be able to kind of migrate over to using Livefyre will certainly be a help for many of those Adobe customers.
Talk about Livefyre now, because what's interesting with them is you have literally every end of the spectrum using Livefyre. I mean, you have just the mom and pop shop down the end of the street, and you also have big enterprise companies using them as well. What does it mean for those customers? How does this affect them at all, especially the smaller ones? I don't know if it helps.
Yeah, I think that for the Livefyre customers, I'm not so sure that this is super compelling to them, because as you said, Kyle, I mean, we could be using Livefyre for this show to help promote this show. There's plenty of you who have something to say about about our behavior on this show, and to be able to capture that and put that out there. They have, again, as you mentioned, small SMB customers, also some of the larger enterprises. I don't see that it's super obviously compelling for them. This is not going to necessarily pull them through into the Adobe suite per se, where they can take advantage of a lot more things. I think that they'll stay fairly isolated. To be honest, I think this might even frustrate some of the Adobe salespeople who need to be out there now going calling in. Typically you have a merger like this, you want to go call into that customer base, right? And I think the pull through is going to be relatively low, because just because, as you said, you're a Livefyre customer doesn't at all mean that you're ready for the Adobe Marketing Cloud.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you. Can they actually penetrate? I mean, a lot of those, teeny tiny companies, like I said, the mom and pop shop, the sub shop that's using Livefyre to showcase some of their recipes, are they going to be able to buy into any of Adobe's bigger products? Probably not, right?
Yeah. Again, if it would be appropriate for them, then it would have already been appropriate for them before. And so I don't think that this is necessarily that thing that kind of gets them over the hill to take that on. So no, I don't think it's going to make much impact at all on the existing Livefyre customer base.
Fair enough. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Dell once again. Yes, CEO Michael Dell announced at the EMC World Conference in Las Vegas that the biggest merger in tech history will be declared by Dell Technologies. We've heard this before, haven't we, folks? We definitely have. For those who aren't acquainted with the merger, Dell announced in October last year that it would be acquiring the tech company for EMC for $67 billion, which we know, a huge chunk of dough right there, which we reported actually last show and considered by many in the tech industry to be the largest deal in tech history. However, Scott, the merger involves a substantial amount of debt, as we talked, approximately $50 billion. Therefore, both companies have been planning to dispose of as many non-core assets as they can in order to diminish the financial burden, including Documentum. Scott, we continue to hammer this home. Nothing's happened. They're ditching a bunch of companies. What do you think of this?
I think our producers are testing us, Tyler, to see how many times we can talk about this subject and make it seem new. Let's see, we talked about it in February. In February, we said Dell is thinking about buying EMC. And then in April, we said Dell is buying EMC, but EMC needs to sell off Documentum first. Now we say, if Dell buys EMC, this is going to be the biggest deal ever. Valid. Okay, so they continue to stay in the news, and Michael Dell is better than anybody at doing that. But I think ultimately here, what we are talking about, sure, if we want to take a new spin on this, then the point here is, yes, in order to make this deal go through, it would be one of the biggest, but it's $50 billion of that money is debt money. And so both of them have to shed a fair amount of their business. I think we've already seen Dell shed Perot systems to NTT Data. A couple of other things are looking to get off of their books as well. And certainly there's been lots of speculation that EMC would shed Documentum in order to make this deal happen as well.
So, do you see any of this happening anytime soon? I guess the question, because we're talking $67 billion. I mean, like I said, this is a huge money, biggest ever. Is this even on the horizon though? Right now, as we talk about this here in May, I mean, is this going to happen this year, do you think? Or are we still saying we really have no idea?
To be honest, again, I'm an industry analyst, not a financial analyst. I think those guys are probably the best ones to say whether or not this can happen and what needs to happen in order for that to happen, to take place. From my standpoint, it's just starting to look, it's getting old, to be honest, to talk about it. I think if we were to talk about an interesting point of this is with the kind of commentary that we had last month, which is what would happen to a Documentum if EMC were to sell that off. Is that still a thriving business? I think that it is. Are there some good buyers for it? I think that there are. We talked about HP being one of them, and I got a little bit of news from that. I don't have any insider knowledge though, but in terms of how long does it take to make this thing go through, to be honest, I really don't know. I just hope that it's not another, Drupal 8 sort of thing where we talk about it for years ad nauseum before it finally comes out.
It's starting to sound like the LeBron decision, right? When everybody just said, I'm sick of listening to this guy, but hey, it's the biggest story out there. You got to talk about it.
That's right.
That's what happens at the end.
Maybe we'll get Michael Dell to come on.
That's a good call. I think we should.
If it's in the distillery, I think we might be able to get him.
I don't think we'll have any hard time with that whatsoever. All right, well, let's move on. We'll talk about Marketo, a cloud marketing platform just recently held their annual Marketing Nation Summit in Vegas just a few weeks back. And what wasn't discussed by any keynote speaker there has the apparent hiring of investment bank Morgan Stanley to explore various strategic alternatives, including a potential sale of the company, actually. And while there's no official comment from the company, their stock, which had declined more than 25% so far this year, gained as much as 20.5% immediately after the rumors were floated. Now, Marketo, which posted a $72 million loss over the past 12 months and had $95 million in cash at the end of the first quarter, has been reducing its debt load, putting in a more than manageable position for a potential takeover. So if Marketo is actually ready to sell, Scott, but their weaknesses are declining net income, disappointing return on equity, weak operating cash flow, generally discouraging historical performance in stocks, who is the logical buyer for all this? I mean, that's the big question right now.
I think this is tough. Look, Marketo has been one that for a very long time has taken the position that we're going to be the standalone. There was this long run on marketing automation for quite some time. The big players, Adobe came in and bought Neolane, which is now Adobe Campaign. Salesforce came in and bought 2 platforms, in fact, ExactTarget and Pardot. And then you had Oracle come in and make their buy. So they're there was this big run on them. You have HubSpot that's still out there for kind of the smaller SMB. And Marketo was the one kind of standalone that everybody, including myself, kept talking about, oh, they're going to be the next one, they're going to be the next one, they're going to be the next one. Quite frankly, they were one of the most innovative ones kind of on the market, to be honest, and very well loved by the larger enterprises. I think that the thing here, though, is they've grown so much on their own that now they become a hard buy, and everybody's kind of already got it. Becomes this kind of like, what's the game there? The musical chairs, where you get left without a chair, and I don't know who the next buyer is. I think it could be an SAP, and let's talk about that in a second. But honestly, at this point, what Phil expressed is some frustration. Phil, their CEO, he expressed some frustration, and I agree with him completely. Is that he's over here in a time where marketing automation is extremely popular, and a lot of enterprises are looking for marketing automation solutions. The large vendors have the ability to basically go and drop their prices very easily because they don't need to look to marketing automation to be their profit bearer.
That's not the thing, but the total opposite with Marketo. They've got one. They've got one product. That's the only way to make money at this point. So they can't lower anything.
That's right. That's right. And I think so they have a hard time in this environment not having an owner, because without that owner, without that backer, and I think, like I say, I think SAP could be one of those ones to come to the dance and want to go and pick them up. But without that backer, it becomes very difficult to compete in this environment. Now, in the cloud marketing, for marketing automation in the cloud, which they are, you could look to a private equity firm, just basically anybody with deep pockets, whether that be another large vendor or whether that be a private equity firm. Either one would really help them out of this bind that they're in.
Okay. Talk about SAP a little bit more. I'm kind of curious to get you. Why are you thinking SAP?
Yeah, so I think SAP, well, for one, there's kind of 2 larger platform players that are still around, that are on the table here. Microsoft, who I don't think it makes sense for, because they basically pulled themselves out and said SharePoint is no longer about web content management. They don't have any other parts of the pieces. They sold off their commerce solution. It just doesn't seem like they're trying to go build up a big marketing suite. 2 is SAP. And SAP very much has been in the mindset of building up a marketing suite. They made the big Hybris acquisition, I guess it's been probably a couple of years ago now, and have built up SAP marketing for the last while. They've been trying to build that from scratch. I think this would give them a real bolster, and they can also afford them. So I think that could be a really good option. But unquestionably, these conversations have already been held, and so this has been predetermined. And so the fact that Marketo is going out now looking for a bank, either it's to make that deal happen, or it's to basically go find private equity money, which is the basically only other option, I think, for them.
One or the the other. It's going to be one or the other. Definitely is. All right. Coveo, a provider of intelligent search technology, rolled out a new Sitecore native search app. Now, Coveo for Sitecore Pro Cloud Edition and a new version of its native on-premise Sitecore integration, Coveo for Sitecore version 4.0. Now, the point of both new editions is to assist Sitecore users and system integrators, to provide and optimize more sophisticated digital customer experiences. Now, as one of Sitecore's largest technology partners, Scott, what's your take on the significant leap forward by Coveo, both in terms of architecture as well as capabilities?
Yeah, certainly, as you said, Coveo has been one of the kind of people right there at the altar with Sitecore all along. They've worked with them hand in hand for quite some time, and there's a really large overlap in terms of their customer base, at least in terms of as it relates to Sitecore's customers picking up Coveo as a great search option. They talk about search. Oh, sorry. So I'll answer your question, which is kind of going in a different direction here, but all right. No, which is about look, I think here, Sitecore has made no bones about the fact that they're trying to go into the cloud. I think their cloud strategy, I've criticized it a bit in the past. It's a little behind, but certainly for Coveo to come out and have now kind of a very holistic cloud strategy for them to build the product so that it's native with the Sitecore platform makes it much less architecturally complex, much easier to roll out with a Sitecore offering, and it's also more user friendly. Doesn't require as much development as they've created this kind of web-based configuration capabilities now. So certainly that's easy. Makes it easier.
And talk about the familiarities as far as the executives are concerned. I mean, there's that's going on as well, right?
Oh, good point. Yes. So Mark Floysan, nice lead in there. What do you mean, Tyler?
What do you mean?
Mark Floysan was a VP of what was he the VP of? Product marketing, sorry, for Sitecore. Left maybe 2 months ago or so to take the CMO role over at Coveo. So certainly you've always had familiarity amongst the executives, but certainly now you've got somebody who really understands where the Sitecore product is going, understands that roadmap very well as he created it essentially, created their new offering, and now to see those two things come together, I think that makes it a heck of a lot easier for these guys.
Makes total sense, definitely does. All right, moving on, the very last one we want to talk about is Microsoft. They held its Future of SharePoint event in San Francisco and announced a new cloud-first, mobile-first version, which is the big point, and roadmap for its SharePoint solution, as well as innovations that empower people, teams, and organizations to intelligently discover, share, and collaborate on content from anywhere and any device, which is the big point that we're going to be talking about now. Now, the company also announced general availability of SharePoint Server 2016, which includes new hybrid capabilities that will enable on-premise customers to tap into the innovation via Office 365. Now, Jeff Tepper, the corporate VP of OneDrive and SharePoint team, shared the roadmap across 4 areas of innovation as follows: simple and powerful file sharing and collaboration on any device, the mobile and intelligent intranet with modern team sites, publishing and business applications on your desktop and in your pocket, an open and connected platform that evolves SharePoint extensibility to embrace modern web development, investments in security, privacy, and compliance across Office 365. So Scott, what's your take on the future of SharePoint 2016 laid out by Microsoft? I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's one word that can be said: mobile. Right? It's gone mobile, right?
If there's anything to be said, it is welcome to 2012 Microsoft. Good for you. Mobile first. We're thinking mobile here. I love it. We're thinking user experience. Great for you. I mean, to be honest, this is exactly what we're talking about here, is that they have basically gone and said, okay, we hear you people, you like your mobile devices, and you'd like to be able to use SharePoint on your mobile device. So, yes, welcome to 2010, like I say. I think
welcome to 2010?
2010.
That's what it means.
That's what I'm
we're
saying.
6 years ago. We're talking, folks.
No joke. Maybe 2012. No, 2010. 2010. When was it that we cared? We were starting to talk about mobile first. When was it that we were talking about, the user experience matters, which is what they've basically gone and enhanced.
An afterthought now, because everybody has been doing that for some time.
Yeah. So it's a ridiculous statement, is the point. But look, they are there, and there are certainly lots and lots and lots of enterprises who count on SharePoint, and it has been shoved down their throat by their IT department, who is constantly looking for relevance to go and say, we did something for you, and it was in fact that we just threw through SharePoint at you. Now finally, team sites, which is their sites is what they call for their intranet kind of place for the departments to hang their hat, finally now is a little bit more user friendly for you. Finally now you can have it in your pocket. Finally now Office 365, which has been this innovative product, which is, you know, Office in the cloud for you now can actually interact and you can share documents with that with your SharePoint. Certainly that's going to be beneficial to all those folks. So I think, did they feel the pressure from Box and Dropbox and all that? Certainly they did, and finally now they've come through. They've been very lucky that it's not so easy. The barrier to exit here is not nearly as easy, right? And they're very fortunate
when they have you,
about that
they've
fact.
got you.
They've got you. And so now finally they can be slow to come to bring it to them. But so they are finally offering some of those things that many of us have enjoyed for a very long time.
So with that in mind, let me just ask you one question about that, because when I hear you talk about this and the fact that this should have been happening 6 years ago, 7 years ago in a sense, will they be bringing people back? I mean, as far as customers are concerned, will customers want to come back because of the mobile now, or do they say, no, I'm still gone from it, or because the barrier to exit was so hard?
Will users flock to SharePoint because of this? The answer is no. All that you are doing is appeasing those poor souls who are out there that this has been forced down their throats. Now they can finally have it in their pocket. That's all that you've done here. You know, I mean, seriously, look, SharePoint is relevant to very, very, very many people out there, a huge part of our audience. And quite frankly, whenever we do a show about SharePoint, it's one of our most watched shows, right? So this is on the minds of many people, and this will satisfy many of them. I mean, this will make it easier to deal with the fact that you are on SharePoint. And it's a very valid solution for, you know, internal sharing and document sharing, and now they've made it a little bit easier. So it's valid. I don't mean to completely dismiss it, but it is a little joke.
He loves to rag, folks. That's just what he does. Fair enough. All right. We're going to be taking a very quick commercial break, but don't you go anywhere, because when we return, we're going to be discussing the digital transformation and how it is, in fact, now a business imperative. Don't go anywhere.
So you've got a great website. Your marketing team spends hours driving visitors to it and nurturing them into leads. And your sales team spends hours collecting, qualifying, organizing, and chasing those leads. Sales wants to focus on what they do best, selling, and marketing wants to get on with what they do best, creating innovative campaigns. But how do you make both teams happy? The solution is marketing automation.
Welcome back to CMS-Connected, the content management industry's only news commentary show. I'm your host, Tyler Pyron, joined as always by Scott Lewer. And today, the topic of conversation is all about the digital transformation of technology into virtually everything. Now, according to markets and markets research, the global digital transformation market's expected to grow to over $369 billion in just 4 years. Yeah, 2020, just 4 years away. That's kind of scary. Now, with North America expected to be the largest market on the basis of spending and adoption of digital transformation market. Now, although the impact of digitization is really not new at this point in time, the digital economy is entering a new age that presents unprecedented challenges for all CEOs, CMOs, and CTOs, basically anybody with the C in their title. Now, digital tools are invading the business environment, provoking significant changes in the way we work, communicate, and sell. Now, everyone seems to be talking about the digital transformation from the CIO perspective, but we want to take a look at it the digital marketing perspective, and we welcome our extremely knowledgeable and esteemed guest, Leah Kinthart. Leah, welcome in. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me. This is a beautiful venue.
And of course, you know, Leah's been off to the side enjoying some cocktails of her own, I'm sure, right?
Later on.
Later on. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, Leah, let's kind of get right into this right now. Why should an organization be concerned about digital transformation right now?
Sure. Daniel Newman wrote in Forbes last year that an organization will be able to hold on to their core group of customers, but unless they go through a digital transformation, they simply won't make it. I see companies really need to transform in two ways right now. It's very simple. Outwardly, in how they respond, actually how they utilize the newest technologies to be the most competitive, and inwardly in how they're responding to how both consumers, customers, and their employees are using technology. I can give the example of the construction industry, for example. Really interesting stats, 40% of construction costs are labor. A construction worker's day, 29% of that day is spent idle, waiting for a paper permitting. So I know there's a stat that if you were to apply enterprise mobility to that equation, you could actually save the cost of 1 day per week per employee. So it's really amazing to me that organizations are still doing paper-based administration. That inward part, that marketing aspect, which is again what I'm going to be talking about today, we know consumers are using technology in radically different ways, and it's constantly changing, it's moving really fast, and yet marketers are really pretty much still marketing like it's 2005. So we're losing our customers, and we're not getting new customers.
Scott, that's perfect. We were talking about 2010 earlier, now we're talking about 2005.
Just drink up, we keep getting
dialing back
further back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, and it's funny that you talk about this. We at DCG, we talk about digital outside and digital inside with respect to digital transformation. So perfect, great to hear. But maybe take a step back for us and tell us a little bit tell us what is digital transformation in the first place.
Sure, I made that in and outside thing up, so that's cool. Basically, some people would say that we're in the third phase of embracing digital technologies. The first would be digital competence, the second was digital literacy, and now digital transformation. As you all know, digital is nothing new, digital marketing, we've been doing it since the 90s and since the 2000s. However, what's changing is we're going from a one-way sort of relationship to a two-way relationship. And consumers, you touched upon this, consumers are actually demanding that conversation be two-way. And again, as marketers, we're posting a tweet, we're sending an email, we're posting an ad, and we're really not touching upon that two-way conversation. If you look at, for example, millennials, only about 1% of millennials trust a brand because of an ad. They really want authenticity. And to get that authenticity as marketers, we have to totally do a 180 on how we're marketing. And so what's coming into play now is something I'm sure you all know. We talked about content marketing. And I like to describe content marketing in a very different way. You put the two words together, content and marketing, it actually changes the meaning of both words. So content needs to be very relevant to your customers. And that's where that marketing strategy comes in, is making sure that content is relevant. But with the marketing aspect, it's actually not even marketing at all. It's providing useful information to your customers, to consumers, so they can do their jobs, and so they can make informed purchasing decisions. Doing that sort of tactic with content marketing, as well as providing a space for consumers, or in the case of B2B, for people to get in touch with their colleagues and learn, so both learning from your content and also from each other, and really being where the action is and curating and creating those conversations. That's where that whole tactic lies.
Yeah, I was going to say, I come from the marketing background, really, and with that marketing background, you have a lot of, like you said, I want to post this, I want to just send and spread my message up there, as opposed to opening up that kind of two-way street, as you said. And that's kind of the important thing that as marketers and content marketers, we always have to remember at the end of the day. So talk to me about the challenges. What do you see as the biggest challenges within this digital transformation?
Sure. I think it goes back to that whole idea that we're in this third phase of embracing digital technologies. A lot of companies, a lot of CEOs might say, we already did the digital transformation. We have a blog, we're tweeting, we have email, and it's complicated. Maybe years ago you could tell a group of marketers or a team, well, we need to transition from the paper-based or the ads into digital. Now you're telling a marketer, okay, that way you tweeted in 2013 or even last year, that's not working. So it can get frustrating, both to people who have this kind of knowledge of new marketing and people who really want to keep things the way they were. There is a flip side, though, that there are some positives with digital transformation. A guy named Bar Seitz, a McKinsey analyst, he says that actually he calls digital transformation a Trojan horse for a broader business transformation, and he sees that it has really positive impacts on changing the organization. He also says, for example, that technology or staffing, those things aren't the most difficult things in digital transformation, and I found this to be true, but changing the culture, that is one of the most difficult aspects. So really, and it goes back to that idea of resistance, and really being able to approach that and make those changes.
And Scott, we see that. I mean, we were just at the Internet, Reloaded event just last month, and they were talking about actually getting people to buy in, right? I mean, exactly what we're talking about here. But kind of give me your 2 cents. I know you have the next question lined up, but I want to get your thoughts on that.
No, sure. I think it's all that we've talked about. I think that the McKinsey guy was spot on. Not even that it's a Trojan horse, but I think it's explicitly, intentionally a business transformation effort. I mean, I think you're starting to even see the notion of E being dropped. E-commerce, it's now just commerce. I mean, it's just like digital is business now, and if you don't have a digital aspect to your business, then I don't think that you are going to be in business for very long ultimately. And so this notion of transforming digitally is transforming certainly the business, how it works inside and outside, as you talked about. And certainly something that we haven't mentioned a whole lot about is data as well, and the use of data within marketing, within the organization, and how you're going to be able to use all that and tie it all together to make yourselves more efficient, more effective. But I wonder, so this is viewed by many as this big gigantic elephant, right? And everybody knows how you eat an elephant is kind of piece by piece. So how and where do you start to see some results quickly? How long does it take to start to see you've decided I want to take this on, you've got maybe buy-in from the very top. At what point do you start to see some effects?
Sure. I actually will touch upon that idea of data being an issue. I'm, a big convert. I love, using those best practices, and I found it's overwhelming and shocking how once you apply them, it's like either baking a cake or a mathematical formula. Like a guy named Joe Polizzi who runs the Content Marketing Institute, he talks about this 4-1-1 formula, and I can't stop talking about that to people. I'm like, if you apply it, it's instant gratification. You're going to get that response. You're going to get really overwhelming response. What I'm actually finding is, if you think about it, for the past 10 years, yes, we have all this great marketing automation, but that marketing automation is really measuring that digital marketing that I actually call traditional marketing that we've been doing for 10 years. So it really does a good job of tracking links back to your site. But if you're going to start doing really unusual, like providing this information and using social media in very new ways, it makes sense. I'm not surprised that it's really difficult to kind of track and measure that marketing. So I think that's going to be a challenge moving forward, or it is a challenge.
I think just add one thing there. Tim Walters wrote a piece for us last week on Digital Clarity's website about Marshall McLuhan, who was a very famous professor, and he talked about how you essentially, even though we make advances in things like technology, we always kind of look at them through the lens of the kind of last version of that technology. And so we don't fully exploit the new technology for what it can be because our mindset is in that of the kind of latter. So think about, for example, when you transition from radio to TV, right? You didn't use the full capability. It was like radio shows before, they were these just interactions, and you went to TV and it was literally the guy in front of you just kind of reading the news, and that's what it looked like. And it was the same way that he used to read the news in front of just the microphone before, right? And only now you're starting, not only now, but now you start to see in the news, it's lots of video, incorporation on site, whatever, all those capabilities of what television brought. Same sort of thing I think here is you might have many new capabilities that these new technologies are affording you, but we're thinking about them in our last mindset, the way we used to do marketing, and we're applying those old habits and behaviors to these new capabilities, and so we haven't really unleashed the full capabilities of the new medium, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things I want to ask, I kind of want to dial it back, and when we talk about how can we see results, I mean, I think we have to start with the team, right? So let's talk about the team itself, the hiring, the training. These are the people that are on the front line. When we talk about being your brand voice, the people that you hire have to have your brand voice. They have to have full buy-in, especially when we're talking about external publications. With that in mind, when we're going about the hiring and we're going about the training, what are some of those personality traits? Talk to me about that. What are the personality traits that you look for when we're actually trying to hire someone that's going to be your brand voice or going to be leading the charge of this for a successful digital transformation, really?
Sure. I might surprise you with that answer. It might not be, very textbook.
That's perfect.
We like surprises.
I like that. That's what makes it fun.
Drink up.
I like the idea of, I think your new hire really needs to have humility. And as you're going in, you hire someone who's obviously highly skilled. They know all the amazing new best practices of content marketing. They come into the position, But those people really need to respect the traditional marketers who are on the team, the product marketers who are probably working with the company for 5 or 10 years, because you do have to be open to change. Because even some of these best practices, sometimes you do have to manipulate them a little bit and bring in some of the older traditional marketing best practices. That's been my experience. Another thing with that humility is you're going to, very quickly learn about your audience, your customers. You'll learn about what the best channels are. You say, okay, these are the most effective channels for us, but then suddenly, boom, things change in 6 months. So that humility, really being adaptable. And there's a really interesting thing. I think we're going to start to see more very non-traditional backgrounds in our marketers. I go back to that guy, Bar Seitz, but the McKinsey guy, he talks about, this might not be that unusual, but Apple has a designer on their executive team. Burberry just hired as a designer as their CEO. You're going to see a lot more journalists being hired as marketers. Even in my experience, 4 years ago, I remember talking to HR recruiters and they were like, well, are you a software marketer? Are you an insurance marketer? What do you do? A year ago, it's like, wow, that's amazing. You've done B2B and B2C, that's great. Or you can strategize content across different areas. That's an awesome skill, that's what we want. Additionally, for hiring people, it's really important. McKinsey talks about a culture of constant change, really having someone who's, for example, had an experience with startups, who's very entrepreneurial, because content marketing is still very new. So someone who can come in and meet these challenges with completely original ideas sometimes. So that's some of the things I think are really important with teams.
Interesting.
Scott, who's on your staff? I mean, I'm going to do backgrounds. I mean, pretty much everybody has a similar background, right?
Yeah, a little bit. We have somebody who knows something a little bit about content marketing, certainly in Robert Rose, who works with Joe Polizzi extensively. Robert is part-time with us at DCG as an analyst and does a lot of writing with us. But he's
full-time rock star.
But
too.
he's full-time rock star, absolutely, 100%. He's actually guested for me in this show even once before, and he's the chief strategy officer with Joe Polizzi over at the Content Marketing Institute. So we know a little bit about that for certain. But I think you're right. Certainly, there's an awful lot of. We might talk about content marketing day to day, but there are certainly many organizations out there that, this is something fairly new to them and embracing. But I'm interested, you talked about some of those personality traits. Informa brought you in to be its digital transformation person. What was it that kind of got you into this space?
Sure. Well, I pretty much fell into marketing. And I have to say, from what I know about the marketing, say 1996, it really just wouldn't have been interesting to me, like the marketing 2016, because it's really all about, and no offense to people, but it's really all about like learning about your customers. Any given day for me is actually for me, it's very exciting. On a given day, I'm strategizing content about biotech in India, or I'm looking at the newest group of young people. You talked about adapting to 10 to 18-year-olds, for example, cybrids. That's going to be a whole new generation of people we're going to need to learn to market to. So on a given day, I'm really kind of dabbling in lots of different ideas, immersing myself into learning about customers. It's really exciting. Another thing I think the reason I got into this digital transformation is most of the organizations I worked for were early adopters. So people were selling insurance differently. People were the beginnings of e-commerce, the beginnings of consumer packaged goods online, the beginnings of furniture online. And they were really providing very original solutions to unique challenges. So also, I at the beginning of my career, I was exposed to people like Guy Kawasaki, Gary Vaynerchuk. I got to see them speak. I will be honest, I loved what they said. I was really excited. I don't think I 100% understood it. And I definitely didn't apply it back then. Maybe because the organization didn't allow for me to do that, or for whatever reason. And so honestly, that gives me patience. It took me a while to become the marketer I am. So that sort of exposure. I think right now what's happening, there's a statistic that only 5% of organizations feel that they've mastered digital to a point of differentiation from their competitors. And I'm not surprised by that statistic. It's a really confusing time right now for people. We went from doing non-digital to digital. It was a different media, but the same method. Now we're turning marketing on its head. We're saying, instead of trying to put ourselves in front of our competitors, we're actually saying, hey, we're acknowledging our competitors. We're actually sometimes talking to our customers about our competitors to educate them. It's actually a really exciting and disruptive time to be a marketer.
Awesome. Very cool stuff indeed. Leah, before we let you go, obviously, thank you so much for taking time out to join us on the set. Where can folks find you? They want to get in contact with you. Where do they find you?
Sure. Well, the best way would definitely be Twitter. My name _ Leah Kinthart. And I'm really excited to hear if anybody has any answers for me about some of these challenges that I brought up that I'm going through. And also, anybody has any more questions, I'd love to, explore and discuss further.
Great. Very
Thank
cool
you very
stuff.
much for coming.
Leah Kinthart, folks. I am Tyler Pyron. He is Scott Lewer. We'll be right back when we talk with Amy Martin in just a few seconds right here on CMS Connected.
Your job is to cut through the noise. To succeed, you need to reach out to your target audiences in real time with messages that speak to them. You can't let technology get in the way of your brand. That's the spirit. First Spirit is a powerful solution that helps you effectively communicate and engage with your target audience. Get an awesome ROI. Success in the market means your message got through to the right people at the right time in the right way. And that's why you need First Spirit. Get started with digital marketing. Visit www.espirit.com now.
Welcome back to CMS Connected. I am Tyler Pyron, and in today's Spotlight segment, we will be reviewing Interact Intranet. Now, Interact is one of the world's fastest growing intranet software companies with more than a decade of experience delivering collaborative intranet solutions. Now, Interact is headquartered in Manchester, UK, with offices in New York, San Francisco, and has over 1 million users across a diverse range of clients, both in the private and public sector. Now, joining us via Skype for a more in-depth review of Interact is Amy Martin from Falcon Software. Hi, Amy. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm great. It's good to see you, Tyler. Welcome you back to the show.
Thank you very much. Now, I got to ask you before we go any further, very quickly, what do you think of Scott and I being here on location by ourselves in the distillery? Because you've got to be a little bit nervous, right?
Well, I have to say that I'm a little jealous. I'm sure you've had a few cocktails. Getting prepped for the show? No, not at all.
Not at all. We're always professional here. I promise you that. But anyways, let's jump into it. Let's talk about Interact. Give me a little bit more on their background.
Yeah, definitely. So Interact is an out-of-the-box internet platform, which is a very sophisticated and intelligent platform that really focuses on comprehensive workplace experiences for the end user. And it's really great for companies that don't have a developer on hand, don't have designer or IT, but also for those companies that don't want to take their staff off billables. They just want an intranet now, and they want to start utilizing it. So they first started in 2004. The CEO, Nigel Danson is his name. He's based, and the headquarters are based in the UK in Manchester. And in the last few years, they've really expanded. They have an office in New York, and then I also heard, juicy story, that they're opening up a new office just this month in San Francisco. So I think I might have been the first person to hear that, so that's exciting. But I think what's really interesting about this company is the fact of how much they have expanded in the last year. They've really expanded about 150% in the US marketplace. And they're projecting about the same, 150% for 2016, which is a huge number to hit again. But I really think that it is feasible for them, as they are, it's an internet platform that's really socially based. And as internets are getting more and more popular, millennials are using them more and more. Millennials really want recognition. They want to have that social workplace attention at work. So yeah, I hope for the best for them, and I think they can do it.
Now, you mentioned those targets, those are big targets. Were you able to get any information about why and how they hit this target back in 2015?
Yeah, I did actually. I got to speak directly with the US marketing director, Steve Zucker. So he gave me kind of the inside scoop of how they've expanded in the last year. And the reason kind of why they've done that, or part of the reason, is because of their work with nonprofits. And they really have settled into this, this niche very naturally. It wasn't really the way they planned out from the beginning, but is really, really working well for them. If you look at some of the big names that they're working with, they have about 650 customers worldwide. But in the U.S., some of the big nonprofit names are, you know, YMCA, Make-A-Wish Foundation, March of Dimes, ASPCA, so all the really, really big nonprofit names. And I think what Steve Zucker was mentioning is that the reason that momentum has really started in this marketplace is that they really, you know, nonprofits have a lot of pressure on them to deal with charitable spend, to deal with where is that charitable spend going? How is it being spent compared to their admin costs? And donors and stakeholders, they really need to know what are people doing every day? What are they doing with that money? So total transparency. Intranets are great for transparency, but especially with Interact, they really, really nail this. They offer these, it's a live timeline that will show you content being pushed to all end users based on their activity. So their profile, keywords, not to mention like who they follow, the access they're trying to gather. And they also offer @mentioning and liking, which companies are really being on board with too. So this is just really great for nonprofits because they really then can see from these timelines all the current content that's happening with these with you know, the organization. So total transparency, total accountability, which is really what nonprofits are looking for.
Yeah, right. Now you just mentioned, you talked about the companies that they work with, both, you know, in the public and private sectors. Talk about who they're working against and really how they differentiate themselves against them.
Right, yeah. So no one really likes talking about your competitors, obviously, but it's interesting to know because you can learn from your competitors as well. One of their biggest competitors is Jive. They're a big player in the game. They also deal with Igloo to a lesser extent. But what's interesting is they are getting a lot of calls, inquiries, and business from SharePoint. So people, you know, that are using SharePoint are looking for other alternatives. SharePoint is not the only internet software provider out there anymore. So it's interesting, I think how Interact really stands out compared to their competitors is they offer this full content management intranet, so drag and drop, you can really get it to function exactly how you want it to, but also with this amazing social provider. So it's really an all-in-one platform. And I also found an article from Reagan who did a survey on the top 20 alternatives to SharePoint. Again, they were mentioning that SharePoint isn't the only alternative out there right now for intranets. And from the results, half were using SharePoint, of course, but the other half were using different alternatives. And this is really great for Interact. They were rated #1, followed by Joomla at #10, Drupal at #11, and then Jive at #12.
All right, first off, you just amaze me when you memorize all those numbers. You just literally just rattle them off one at a time.
Oh, right, I have no notes in front of me.
Of course not. I would never think you had any notes whatsoever. All right, now let's go to the next question. You talk about them being #1. Usually when someone's ranked #1, you think that comes with a pretty big price tag. What does their pricing structure actually look like?
Yeah, so they offer great pricing, very reasonable, very flexible. It's kind of a baseline price of $8 per user to start with. But then they also have flexible pricing, so if you have more users, a larger quantity, they offer volume discounts. Another great draw for nonprofits is that they offer a 30% discount. So again, I think that's another reason why they're expanding in this industry so much.
So what everybody wants to know is, what's next? What do you see coming down the pipeline for Interact?
Yes, some exciting things are happening with this company. And I was also one of the first to find out that they have just released, or just about to release, the latest version of Interact, which is 7.9. So I had the awesome, amazing opportunity to get in touch with the VP of Sales, Darren Jennings. And he's actually with us right now to tell us all about the release, when it's coming, all about it. So I'm so excited to introduce him. Hi, Darren. How are you?
Hi, Amy. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So tell us, I'm just so interested and excited to hear all about this new version. Tell us a little bit about 7.9.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Some of these enhancements come from the innovations at our technical side, and they're more technical in nature, like changes to our intelligence algorithm, like you mentioned. But a lot of these updates come from our customer community, and our customers are made up primarily of communicators. These are people in marketing and communications that are not necessarily heavy technical type things. So they're very practical and common sense. And so one of the most fundamental changes that we're making in 7.9 is actually updating our content composer. So it's probably one of the most fundamental parts of any intranet, as you might imagine. And so we've streamlined the content composer. It's getting a whole new look and feel. So we're making it even easier than ever before to add and update and keep your content fresh and relevant. So really excited about that. There's one of the features, actually, part of the content composer that I'm most excited about, which is the discoverability score. So we're actually introducing some metrics for the content authors before it even goes live in terms of being published on the internet, in terms of how usable is it, how discoverable is it, and how are the people who are intended to consume that content actually going to be exposed to it. So it's going to give a lot of insight even before the content goes live. So very excited about that. There's a lot of other feature enhancements in 7.9. Another area, speaking of people, is actually going to be able to pull in different profile information from across multiple sources. So it's a little more technical in nature, but the idea is a lot of our customers are using Active Directory for authentication and profile fields, but they're also using other systems like HRIS systems like PeopleSoft or Workday. And so they want to pull in different profile fields from multiple systems to create a single version of the truth on the internet. So Interact is going to make that very easy. Say, for example, you've got your first name, last name, and email that lives in an Active Directory. You might also have a manager or your cell phone or some industry-specific certifications that live on PeopleSoft. We can pull that data in, create a single profile experience. The benefit for the employees is they know that no matter what information they need about a colleague, it can be found on the internet. So we're really excited. There's a lot of other changes happening, but you'll have to wait for release to see those.
Oh, wow. Holy, so much happening. That's exciting. And so do you kind of have an idea of when you think it's going to be released?
We do. Interact 7.9 is coming available the last week of May for our cloud customers and for our on-premise customers as well. So they'll be able to download and apply that update. For all of our cloud customers, that will be applied automatically.
Oh, great. So right away, right around the corner.
Right around the corner. Yeah, exactly right.
And so kind of the crystal ball question, where do you kind of see the company headed in the next 3 to 5 years?
That is a crystal ball question. At Interact, our overall goal has always been to be the #1 internet company in the world. Now, we consider that in terms of our customer retention and the feedback we get from our customers. And so, that's a high-level goal. It's quite lofty, but we think it's attainable. And more specifically with that, how we're going to get there, one of our main goals is just to change the way employees consume content at work and engage with information. And so we already know, for example, that employees who engage with some of the intelligent content suggestions available on Interact are much more likely to come back to the internet for more information. So it's a very useful tool. So we're going to continue to innovate in the intelligence areas of the product, so we actually present the most relevant content to the right people at the right time. We also have a big approach towards mobile. There's some things that are coming out in 7.9 that are part of mobile, but that's going to be a continued theme for us going forward in the years to come. So we're investing in the product. We want to make this as easy as possible so that employees just have the best possible experience at work, and they have the tools they need to be successful.
Wow, lots happening. I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the coming year and then even in the future. So thank you so much for your time. This was just so great to hear your feedback personally, right from yourself.
That's right. Yeah, and thank you for not saying the horse's mouth. I appreciate that.
You knew that I was going to say that.
I did. Well, you recovered well. Well, thank you, Amy. It was a pleasure being here.
Yes, you as well.
Excellent stuff indeed, Amy Martin. Great stuff as always. Big thanks to Darren as well, taking time out of the day. Coming up next, we'll bring back Scott in just a few seconds for the CMS Insider.
So you've got a great website. Your marketing team spends hours driving visitors to it and nurturing them into leads. And your sales team spends hours collecting, qualifying, organizing, and chasing those leads. Sales wants to focus on what they do best, selling. And marketing wants to get on with what they do best, creating innovative campaigns. But how do you make both teams happy? The solution is marketing automation.
Welcome back to CMS Connected, everyone. I'm Tyler Piber, and time for the CMS Insider, and the headline reads, DCG research shows higher education institutions at risk with slow shift to customer experience management. Now, the analysis based on the original research conducted by DCG indicates that delivering experiences to education customers rather than publishing content remains aspirational for institutions in the United States and the UK, saying, quote, web managers, content strategists, marketers, and leaders know they should be doing more to engage prospective and current students who are among the most digitally sophisticated audience, said Marianne Kay with DCG. But many teams are overwhelmed by the everyday tasks associated with maintaining their university's current web presence. They find it difficult to evolve from content publishing to digital storytelling. So Scott, kind of give me your quick overview on this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So Marianne was one of the lead analysts on this, and we undertook a pretty long, it was about 6 months, I think, of a research study to basically interviewing lots of organizations, institutions in both the US and the UK, and we really wanted to uncover a few things. Number one, I think we really wanted to get kind of what are the current state of content management practices in these institutions. Two, how are they evolving, like you said, from web publishing to really experience management? How are they making that shift? Three is, what are some of those obstacles that are actually preventing them from making the shift? Because there are plenty, and many of which are cultural in nature, something certainly that those in higher ed are very, very familiar with. And then four is, how can they, we talked earlier on the show with Leah about that notion of digital transformation, and how are these organizations both gauging their progress towards digitally transforming, as well as really how can they know if they are, and how can they go about that process? How can they basically map that roadmap for themselves in terms of making that transformation?
Well, let's go through some of the takeaways. There are basically 6 different takeaways. I'll start with the very first one, and that's delivering an experience as aspirational, as I just mentioned a few seconds ago. Talk about that, the aspirations of it all.
Yeah, I think, basically it says that to be able to take this on holistically is aspirational for them, more so than a real reality. And most of that it's not because there's not a lack of trying. It is the fact that just institutionally these organizations are extremely decentralized. So there's lots and lots of content managed by lots and lots of folks around an institution, and they're not all necessarily on the same page in terms of making sure that they want to present, like, what is consistent? Consistent experience for whom? Is it for the college of this, the college of that, this particular department's audience? Is it an internal audience, an external audience? Becomes very difficult. So culturally is the kind of the biggest stumbling block here, more so, and so that affects the people, the process, the technology. Technology's there, just very difficult culturally for them to make this leap.
We're definitely going to touch on all of those in just a second. Now, talk about the content demand right now, because that's one thing that seems to be happening, is that institutions seem to be struggling with the overall content demand. I mean, we see it with regular traditional, say, publishing agencies, but universities struggling with this.
They really are, and I think there's a huge volume of content. Everything from, I mean, we've worked with large organizations, with Carnegie Mellon, with many others who, one after the other, they all struggle with the exact same thing. Lots and lots of content, very few people, very few resources, and many of them are transient in terms of those who are actually going to be publishing that content, right? So you think about a particular department, they might have a student in now who has to get up and running on how to be able to go about doing this, and they struggle being able to take over the new helm, or they're not as committed to it as maybe the last one was. So you see these kind of waves. Again, you see varying notions of consistency from one department to the next, from one school to the next. Web governance is a really big issue here. Shout out to Lisa Welchman, who is kind of the primo. She's been on the show a couple of times, although she quickly reminds me that she's not on often enough. But they could really use her help in terms of from a web governance standpoint, because trying to figure out who owns what content, who's going to publish, stop and go, all of that is a really difficult thing for these guys.
And that goes into kind of the next point of the pockets, I guess, a school within a school. So the University of Massachusetts School of Law. So the ones that do it well seem to be working in pockets. And I think that's kind of the next takeaway, really.
That's true. So what they're finding here is that while there is some progress, but that progress does come in chunks. And so you go from kind of one department, it might have somebody who's near the top of it who really embraces the notion of digital and really wants to kind of get them out at the forefront. And so you'll see this happening at that department level, at that school level, at that portion of the school. You can see some of that progress, but you very rarely see that actually transcend from one group to the next group because they're very much on different pages. You just don't have, I think, again, there's both a cultural thing, but there's also just the organizational kind of fiefdoms that exist make it such that you just you don't get consensus across at the top.
All right, let's go on. Let's talk about actually the agencies themselves that are there to help them, whether it's the integration, whether it's the actual publishing. They aren't really being used. They're almost underutilized in a sense, aren't they?
It's very true. There are lots of agencies, systems integrators out there who can help them, but what ends up happening is those guys are really undervalued and really underutilized. Oftentimes they have the chops, they have the capabilities to basically be able to help them through this, but they just don't get used. So they end up working kind of, again, at that department level, at that school level, and even though they often come in with ideas of grandeur, so to speak, where they basically might even be hired in to come in and help with some very, very large project, or let's come in and even find a technology that's going to work across the entire school. Next thing you know, it gets isolated down to, okay, we're just going to work with this particular group. And that's really too bad because there's an awful lot of expertise out there, but I think you'll find that many of those agencies are very frustrated at the impact that they've been able to have because of the nuances of higher ed.
So the people that are there, I mean, you talk about the people that know this, the agencies are there. What about the technology? Talk about that. Is the technology there right now?
It's a very good question because I think, counter to some, there are certainly some industries where things like, if you look at media and entertainment, where one could criticize the technology landscape and say that the technology isn't really there to basically be able to make this happen. You find a lot of those in media and entertainment basically going and building their own solutions because some of those out-of-the-box capabilities are just not up to par for them. We found that in institutions of higher ed, certainly those technology capabilities are there. Quite frankly, they're fairly, the capabilities that they're using of the technology they have are fairly minimal, right? They're just not even taking full advantage of it. Things like workflow to be able to help with some of that, overcome some of those cultural challenges, and the governance notions would be able to maybe help them through that, but they're not even utilizing that. So the technology is there. It's just, and in fact, not only is it there, there are actually plenty of vertically focused solutions that actually really try to target higher ed from the content management space to try to kind of meet their needs. And so in fact, they are there. The technology is there, but they're just not making use of it.
Right, the last point that we want to talk about here is that kind of that tipping point for the universities, because at the end of the day, if enrollment's not there and they're not bringing in money, are they going to be saying, oh, I need more resources to create all this content? I mean, what's the tipping point really?
We talked earlier on the show about saying to Microsoft, welcome to 2010, and we said that because they were just going and kind of creating mobile finally in SharePoint, and the reason that I said they were able to kind of stay so far behind the curve there was because they had an audience that was engaged with them that couldn't really leave, right? They had, the barrier to exit was really high. I think same thing in higher ed is they are spoiled at the fact that enrollments are actually only growing year over year across the board at every institution. And quite frankly, it's not until they start to see enrollments decline, it's not until they start to see those kind of more attractive students looking at other institutions and taking their business elsewhere that I think that they're going to actually make a push for this. And so it's kind of a sad state that we're so reactive in academia, where you should kind of be on the forefront. They find themselves really on the back burner, not on the forefront, trying to catch up, because this just isn't a priority. And I think sometimes those cultural barriers are too hard to overcome. I do want to say, though, for those who want to go and download the study, this is not just kind of more for those who are in higher institutions. One of our most popular downloaded tools. We've had a lot of registrations just because of this. Our content is all free, but it's not just kind of telling you what you already know, but it actually is going to be able to give you some real insights into how you can make progress, albeit in small chunks, and how you can kind of get your ideas for your own group, be able to spread across that institution.
Definitely. Make sure you follow CMS-Connected on Twitter, you follow DCG on Twitter, because you guys are obviously sending it out so folks can go ahead and try to download that as well. Awesome. Good show today, my friend, wasn't it?
I think it was. I think this was a really good show today, and it wasn't just because of the fact that we are in a distillery at all, right? At all.
Exactly. But you know what? Next show, we might even top it, because Scott, you're a baseball guy, right?
I am a baseball guy.
Well, being that we're here in Boston and, Boys of Summer, I think it's only right that we shoot a show with some famous ballpark in the background. Yes, that is in fact.
Going to Wrigley?
No. Get out of here. We're in Boston, my friend. All right, that's going to be doing it for today's show. You can also view more information about upcoming shows and watch all of our previous episodes in CMS industry news headlines at cms-connected.com. Before we go, as always, have to say thank you to our sponsors that put this whole thing together, Falcon Software and Digital Clarity Group. And on behalf of my co-host, Scott Lewer, I am Tyler Pyburn. Looking forward to seeing you next time. And remember, get connected, stay connected, right here on CMS Connected.